XCOM Chimera Squad is my definition of a pleasant surprise. Just soldiering through quarantine on a lazy April Tuesday afternoon, across my newsfeed comes the improbable, a new XCOM game getting shadow dropped. Just a short 10 days away, Chimera Squad would be releasing. What's more, if you pre-ordered it or purchased before May 1st, the game was only $10. Now, I fully recognize it may be the trying times we're enduring. That lazy Tuesday suddenly felt like Christmas. I've been a fan of the XCOM series since the reboot, Enemy Unknown, was released in 2012. I remember doing my research and discovering XCOM had first launched in 1994, but I never had the chance to play those games. 10 minutes into Enemy Unknown, I knew I was sold. Where Chimera Squad differs from its predecessors is, well, in a lot of places. Where XCOM 1 and 2 find you operating as the commander of XCOM, at first an international force assembled to fight back alien invasion, then as a resistance seeking to overthrow those alien overlords, Chimera Squad is the result of an XCOM initiative called the Reclamation Project. With the war against the occupying aliens won, XCOM tasks an interspecies team of operatives to support the police of City 31. The former hub of admin control, City 31 has become the world's model city for human and alien integration. As Chimera Squad, and as directed by the Reclamation Project, you are tasked with seeking out and pacifying rogue groups in the city hoping to hamper its lofty goals, while simultaneously tracking down and reclaiming scattered wartime technologies. But, of course, things don't go specifically to plan. In the first moments of the game, you're tasked with saving the life of Mayor Nightingale. Taken hostage by dissidents, 3-1 PD is at a standstill and calls in the cavalry. With Chimera Squad, so newly formed, VERGE, your sectoid psionic teammate, has to take a cab and catch up with the team on site. That's the other way Chimera Squad breaks the mold. Where other XCOM games give you a force of editable, backstoryless characters, this title has operatives with names, backstories, voice actors, and personality. I wasn't sure how I would like this change at first. Part of my love of the series is the stories I can attach to the characters as I grow familiar with each of their abilities. Losing those soldiers becomes so much more personal when I've made up the story and they fall in battle. In Chimera Squad, there's no such thing as losing a character. In fact, character death results in a game over screen and a low checkpoint prompt. Gravely wounded soldiers do have an increased chance of earning a scar, a semi-permanent debuff that can only be cleared by sending him to rehabilitative training, but at first I wasn't sure how I felt about these changes. I had moments from previous games that stuck with me for years, based on the deaths or retrieval of lost characters. Chimera Squad acts as that in the interest of telling a story with its characters, and for such a radical change, it really pays off. Dialogue in mission feels largely the same. Conversations back at base, however, really lend to the depth of the characters. I found myself constantly bemused by the tidbits of information I could glean from these operatives interacting with each other back at base. It only takes a couple of lines to understand where GODMOTHER gets her call sign. In one instance, CHERUB, the affectionate mascot of the squad, asks GODMOTHER to sign off on paperwork allowing the soldier and scientist who had discovered him to adopt him. See, CHERUB is a clone soldier, created by Advent for war, but woken after the ethereal mind control had been lifted. Spoiler alert. He explains that the two people who discovered him set him free and had gotten married a few years later, and now they wanted to adopt him. I truly had no expectation that I would be charmed this much by an XCOM title, but it didn't end there. Later in the game, given the opportunity to recruit another unit to Chimera's ranks, I chose Zephyr, a hybrid bruiser whose only wieldable weapons were her fists. I rarely choose melee characters, but because Chimera Squad is so unique, I figured I would try something new. In her first mission, she was a blast to use. Her attack roots enemies, meaning they can't move on their next turn, and after her attack, she's granted an additional action point so that she can distance herself from enemies that would take advantage of her close range. I was convinced. Then we headed back to base. In her one and only base dialogue that I heard, she asks CHERUB to be her training dummy, except she didn't call him by his name, she called him Knockoff. When confronted by Terminal, another agent on the team, that he has a name, Zephyr waved them away and called for Knockoff to come along. Always the team morale agent, CHERUB complied, telling his defender that it was okay. I never used Zephyr again. She literally developed workshop projects for the next 20 hours of my campaign. Again, I never expected that an XCOM game would make me feel like this about my soldiers, and quite frankly, I absolutely fell in love with this game because of it. Chimera Squad is clearly built on the XCOM 2 engine. As one would assume, with that fact comes the realization that a lot of the combat mechanics for this iteration of the game are immediately familiar. That lends to Chimera Squad feeling like an expansion in a way that few standalones achieve. After learning the non-complex intricacies of the Breach phase, a shock and awe stage that starts every encounter, combat falls into a rhythm that fans of the series will be comfortable with one major adjustment. Rather than the I go, you go, turn-based nature of games previous, this title takes an approach that feels far more like an initiative role in a game of Dungeons & Dragons. The devs at Firaxis reappropriated the term interleaved here. Traditionally meaning to place blank pages between printed pages of a book, here it simply means that your enemy will take turns with you, within a timeline displayed on the right side of the screen. This forces players otherwise familiar with the privilege of running through all of their characters before the enemy gets a chance to act, to plan more carefully. You may only have one agent in line at the start of a fight before hostiles get to retaliate. This leads to an increase in the importance of finding the most synergistic combination of agent abilities. Who can manipulate that timeline? Who can debuff, incapacitate, or eliminate targets the fastest and with the most cascading effect? I found myself at the halfway point of my playthrough, about 15 hours, settling into my squad. Godmother, a mobile, agile, hard-hitting, shotgun-wielding enforcer. VERGE, the sectoid psionic, with the ability to disable, berserk, and mind control assailants. Patchwork, a techie drone pilot whose drone's shock ability could arc between enemies and had a chance of debuffing every target zapped. And finally, BLUEBLOOD, a game-changing gunslinger with 2 pistols, one that completely ignores cover, and the ability to fire multiple times per turn. In any situation, I found that I could finagle my way into disabling or dispatching 2 targets fully or up to 8 targets partially within my first 4 actions. Add to this the few odds and ends you can nab from the weekly scavenger market or side mission rewards, and you can find yourself with a few epic weapons or specialized buff grenades. My favorite being the motile inducer, which gives 2 free actions immediately to whoever I would throw it at. Finding these synergies and supplements is at the core of Chimera Squad, and while the process isn't entirely unique to this title, it certainly feels more important when the turns are interleaved, the quarters are close, and your innate advantage lasts a single Rainbow Six-esque breaching action. Over the course of your game, you'll investigate 3 factions in City 31, the Progeny, Grey Phoenix, and Sacred Coil. Each faction has different units, abilities, and motivations, and as you take out each faction, the surviving factions will scale up in response. It's your job to root out their goals, foil their plans, and neutralize the threatening potential they hold, all while investigating who is behind the assassination of Mayor Nightingale. As illustrated by the comic book-styled cutscenes, Chimera Squad is against the wall and the clock. As unrest in the city rises, you have to manage threats based on their cost to your levels of unrest in the 9 districts of the city. You will forego missions that have good rewards to manage the unrest in a particularly unruly district. Spend your investigation points to deploy security, technology, or financial teams in each district to access buffs that give you the ability to stave off increased unrest, decrease unrest in specific districts, or in the city overall. At its core, Chimera Squad is truly an XCOM game, forcing its players to train their soldiers, research projects in the workshop, manage unrest across a map, and manage resources, all while fielding an active combat team in harrowing and varied encounters. Is it XCOM 3? No, not at all, but one shouldn't conflate the two. Chimera Squad is a $20 exploration into the ways that XCOM can, and I believe will, evolve. Expect to see hero characters in the future, with backstories and voice acting. Expect to see multiple paths in the campaign with escalative properties as the game progresses. But more than anything, expect to feel right at home with Chimera Squad, despite the ways it alters the formula. You've simply moved from Sazerac to Vieux Carré. Your rye whiskey's still there, just this time you have some sweet vermouth. Enjoy.